Hi and welcome. Today I am going to be talking about Vred. In this video I am going to focus on how to create a user-friendly interface built within the scene using geometries as triggers for animations, color changes, and so on. As you can see here, I set up my scene so I can easily swap foot by clicking on those buttons. I can also trigger a color change by clicking on those. I can also explode the view by clicking on the parts themselves and choose to hide or display them all together by clicking on this little guy here. The advantages of setting up a scene like this is that anybody can pick up the file, open it, play with it with the different variants, playing with different options. So it's just fantastic for review with a client, or if you're a student maybe for an exam, you can just open the file and let anybody play with it. Now I am going to show you how I did it. So first we need to import our model. Here is my model, it's an alias file. I will just drag and drag it into the scene. It can take a moment to open if your file is big. The model has been imported. Next, we are going to make sure we are happy with the structure of our file. So here you can do so by opening the graph. The next step will be to create some materials and apply them to the model. For that, I'm going to press Material, right-click here, Create Material, and I am going to choose a unicolor car paint. I will rename it to Helmet Black, enter, and I will make it black. To apply it, you can drag and drop your material onto the parts you want to color, or choose the component you want to color in the graph, then choose the material you want to apply and press Ctrl M. You can now see our helmet is all black. I am now going to repeat the process for every single component and materials. It's not something I want to focus on this tutorial, so I'm going to speed up the video a little bit. I created all the materials I will need in my scene. Now I am going to create a switch material for parts that will change color. A switch material is basically a material containing different material. By applying that switch to a surface, you can later trigger a color change within this switch material. To create a switch material, just right-click on one of your material, then just click Create Switch from Selection. You can now see we have a switch in our material editor. At the moment, it only contains our black. Now what we need to do is also drop our pink here, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and our white, Ctrl C, and then Ctrl V within the switch. Now you can see our switch material contains 3 different materials. Double click on those materials. You can see our switch material is changing color. Now we are going to assign that switch to our model. Now you can close the material editor. I am also going to duplicate my environment, but only do this step if you bake your shadows and don't use ray tracing. Duplicate. And I will duplicate it again. I need a different environment for each foot because their shadow will be different. I will now rename them. Triangle. Square. Round. I'm going to reopen the material editor and create a switch for my environment. It's already created here. I will double click on it. as you can see, it contains my 3 environment. Now we are ready to start building our interface. I will start by setting up the part of our interface that will allow us to swap foot. Before going into detail, I am going to go over the main steps we will go through. We are going to start by creating different variants. The second step is going to drop the geometries we want to show or hide into those variants and choose which one we want to display or not. Third step will be to create sensors on our trigger geometries, our buttons. Step 4 will be to link our variants to their matching sensors, so when we click on one of the buttons, it triggers a different variant. Step 5, 6, and 7 will be related to the animation of our buttons. We are going to create a clip, then animate it, and then we will match those animations to their variants, so the button moves when we click on it. Okay, so let's create our variants. For that, we are going to open the vsets. Here, click plus to create a variant. We will create 3 because we have 3 feet. Rename them. Triangle. Round. And square. We are going to drop our geometries within those variants. So the round foot, the square foot, and the triangle. Now we are going to enable or disable each geometry for each variant. For the triangle variant, we will disable the round one and the square one. For the round one, we will enable the round foot and disable the square one and the triangle one, and so on. Now, if you double click on each variant, you trigger a geometry change. To avoid having to double click in this window all the time to trigger a geometry change, we are going to link those variants to a trigger geometry. For that, I'm going to click Interaction, Touch Sensor. We are going to drop our trigger geometry in the touch sensor window. We will now link our variants to their sensors. Just drag and drop them. If you go to the viewport and hover your mouse over one of our trigger geometry, you will see a little hand appear. And if you click on those buttons, they will now trigger one of our variants. So you will be able to switch different foot. Now I could leave it here and move on to the next stage, but to be fair, it's a bit boring. So we are going to animate that sensor to bring some life onto our interface. Before animating a geometry, just make sure its pivot point is in its center. Click here, move to center object. I'm going to do all of them at once. We are now going to animate our trigger geometry by creating a clip in the clip maker. Select your geometry, then click Wizard. Next, select your time frame. I will animate it over 1 second and finish. Now here you can see an animation has been created and we will edit it in the curve editor. Select your animation. I'm going to animate it on the z-axis first. I'm going to go to frame 3, create a key, frame 10, create a key again, frame 17, same treatment, and it should be okay for the the z-axis. On frame 3, I want it to be at -10, on frame 10 at 50, and on frame 17 at -10 again. I will smooth the curve to ease in and out the animation. Oop, I should have put a keys on frame 20 as well. And I'm going to put it back at 0. Okay, now I will rotate it a little bit as well. I am going to frame 3. I'm going to put a key here, and frame 17. I'm going to put another key here. Now at frame 17, I want it to be at 540 degrees, which is 1.5 turn. Our animation has now been edited, and you can see in the clip here what the animation looks like. Next, we will link our animation to our variant by clicking animation in the variant set and drag and drop our animation into it. Sorry, I should have dropped this in the triangle. Remove this one. So now if we click on our button, you can see it's animated and it triggers a swap as well. Now you need to repeat the process for every single button. I will speed up the video a little bit. It's now all done. You can see each button is animated. Now we can easily swap foot. We are going to take care of the color change. The key steps to create a trigger to change our feet is going to be exactly the same for our color change. The difference is going to be that we are not going to link geometries to our variants, but a material instead. Just create 3 new variants for each color. Here I'm going to call it black, pink, then white. Open the material, go to material in the variant set, then drop your switch material within your variants. Enable pink for the pink variant, enable white for the white variants, then black for the black variants. Close the material editor. Each variant is now going to trigger a color change. Next, we are going to create a trigger geometry with the touch sensor. Drag and drop your trigger geometry in the touch sensor window. Then one more time, link your variants to your sensors. Now, if you click your triggering geometries, it will trigger a color change. You will now animate your triggering geometry by creating a clip. Next, select your time frame. Then edit your animation into the curve editor. Now just link our animation to its variant. our button is now animated and trigger a color change. Repeat the process for all the buttons. Every button has now been animated and trigger a color change. Now we are going to create an on and off trigger. Again, create a variant, rename it, on, off. We are going to assign the components we want to hide or display in that variant. We will then turn them to toggle. And what that does is basically turning on and off your geometry as you double click on your variant. Now we are going to create a sensor, trigger on and off, then apply our variant to our sensor. Now if you click on our button, you will notice that the geometry goes on and off. Now we will animate our button. It's going to be a little bit different from the previous one since we want our button to land on different sides if you hide or show our geometries. What we are going to do is, instead of creating one clip, we will create two. One for flipping on one side and another one for flipping on the other side. Select your geometry, click Wizard, Object, select your time frame. I am still animating it over 1 second. Select your clip, Wizard again, next, one more time from 0 to 1. And we will move the animation to the next free slot. Now we can see here we have two clips with two different animations. We will open our curve window. We will animate the first clip. We will then animate the second clip. Now we want to start from 540 because it was the last position our geometry was in. And then we will jump to 1080 degrees toward the end of the animation. Now we are going to link our animations to our variant. We will allow sequential animation, so both animations are played one after each other. Now you can see our geometry land in a different position whether you are turning it off or on. Now we are going to create the exploded view. Again, create a variant and rename it to exploded. What we want to do next is create two clips again, one for the explosion and the other one for the implosion. Clip, select the geometry you wish to animate, then go Wizard, Object, select your time frame, and finish. Here we can see we have 4 animation. Again, I'm going to click Wizard, Object, same time frame, and finish. Move animation to the next free slot. And now we can see we have a second clip for all the parts. We will now edit those animations. Now you just need to assign your animation to your variant. Our animation is now working. Double-clicking on our variant is going to allow the sequential animation to be played. Now we are going to create a sensor again. And what we are going to do is use the animated parts as a sensor. So when you click on those parts, they will act as their own trigger. Then link the exploded variant to every single one of them. So whatever part of your helmet you're going to click on, it's still going to trigger that same variant. I can click on this part of the helmet to open it and this part to close it. Okay, now we can close our window and our interface is basically working. Now the only little improvement we could do is with the shadows. And if you remember at the beginning, I duplicated my environment. So what we are going to do now is bake the shadow in each different environment. Go back to those variants related to the foot swap. What we are going to do is drop the environment on each single one of them. For each variant, you will match its environment. So square for the square and round for the round, and the triangle should be already there. Now what we are going to do is bake the shadow in each individual environment. So the shadow on the environment matches the shape of the foot. Let's select our grind plane here and go Scene, then Bake Light and Shadow. Choose Light and Shadow, Medium, 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 and Enable. What this will allow is to bake the shadow in the texture. If we now switch to the square variant, we can again select our plan and bake the shadow for this environment. Here we can see that the shadows aren't really nice, and it's due to the setting I'm using to just speed up the process a little bit. Let's move on to the last one. And again, calculate all. Our interface is now finished and all working. I hope it was really useful, and you can apply those principles to many items, and I really do hope you are going to have fun doing it. That was it for me, and I hope to see you next time.